What's up everybody, I'm Olin, and in this video we're going to take a look at how you can use visuals to improve the low end of your dance productions. So obviously using your ears is always better than using your eyes when it comes to music, but let's face it, not all of us have huge speakers in perfectly treated rooms, so visuals can just be a good help to get your low end on the level that it has to be to work at a club, for example. And these are just going to be some techniques that I like to use that help me out a lot, but maybe they help you out too, and or just inspire you to come up with some other techniques and approaches that help you out even more. So yeah, let's jump right in. So I would say a great way to start is to grab a bunch of tracks that you really like, where you think the low end is going to be working well and that are in a style of music that you like, and then analyze them with visuals to kind of get a rough idea in which direction you should take your low end. And the two tools that I like to use to do just that is this oscilloscope over here, which is called scope. So if you play something, it will show you the waveform. And then the second tool is Voxengo span, which is just an analyzer, which will show you the frequency content of what you're playing. And you have these options up here with the high resolution option, which gives you a pretty good overview of what's happening there from a frequency perspective. And yeah, basically for the low end, what kind of matters is the levels. How loud is your kick? How loud is the sub of your kick? Same goes for the bass. How loud is the bass in comparison to your kick drum? What frequency content does the bass contain? What frequency content does your kick contain? How long is the kick? How long are the notes of the bass? How are the dynamics? Is it very punchy envelope on the kick? Is it more like a long, fat kick? And different styles have different specs basically, but analyzing them and understanding them can help quite a bit. So let's jump into this random track and take a look at that. So this is a James Hype track. Hope I don't get busted for this, but let's take a look at scope and span and kind of see something that's going on. And by the way, I added this Pro MB, which is just a high cut, so we can just focus on the bass. So now I'm playing this, and as you can see, we have a very fat, loud kick drum, and then some bass notes in between. But you can tell that the low end is mainly leaning towards the kick, and you can also see how sometimes when the bass starts coming in, you have some phase modulation kind of so it's not as clean as here where the bass is, for example, in phase. But understanding that this is totally fine on a professional track is also cool and helpful. So this is kind of the visual part of the dynamics. You can see the kick is kind of punchy but also kind of fat, but most importantly the kick is louder than the bass. Let's look at the frequency content. We can see that the kick has a fundamental around 50 hertz kind of playing a G, and then you kind of have the bass notes playing on top of that. If you actually find a place where there's just the bass playing, you can get an even better understanding of how the frequency content of the bass compares to your kick. So here you can see, all right, the lowest note of the bass is also a G. So here actually the bass is tuned to your kick drum, which if you have a very tonal thing going on can make a lot of sense. It's not like that in every genre, but it can definitely help, and here it's the case. And then all the other notes are playing above the fundamental of your kick drum. So that's something that you can learn from this, is how your arrangement and picking the sample can already heavily influence the sound. Yeah, so if you want to then check this out for your different songs, I would definitely recommend doing that. Check out the visuals, and you can also see the levels in here and see like, okay, how loud is my kick actually as a target? So you can just move the mouse to the point and you see, okay, this is around -27 dB. So this could be something that's obviously very loud and already mastered. But if you turn this down and kind of just to understand the levels and see how loud is the bass in comparison, that can be a great way to start. Let's jump more into kick drums and take a look at some more visuals, because we obviously also have a lot of information in our waveforms inside of our tools. And for kick drums to work in a club, I mean, everything is possible. You can do whatever you want, but for a club, it's kind of that you kind of want a relatively clean, subby tail in order to create a nice bass sound, right? And let me actually get span once again so we can also look at the frequency content. In these kick drums I selected here, you can see that they all have this kind of sine wave thing, which is kind of uninterrupted, right? And you can also see how long the kick drums are, around 200 milliseconds. This one is even 250. So this is going to influence and impact your sound. And these are all sampled from some tracks, and to get an understanding of how long your kick should be in a specific style, check out your tracks. Look, you can even look at the waveform over here and then mark your area and see how long it is on the bottom left-hand corner. And this can also sometimes be timed in tempo. So the length and the rhythm of your kick also is kind of dependent on the tempo and how you want to handle it there. So these are kind of nice and clean kicks. And then if you look at some of this stuff, these are just maybe extreme examples. They sound kind of cool and they could be a good layer, but it's very short and doesn't have the strong low end tail, which you need if you want to make it like a smacking house track. So you can always check out the waveform as a visual to kind of understand what is going on. And then if you look at the frequency content, you can also see what is the fundamental frequency and how is how are the frequencies distributed. So this one, for example, doesn't sound as crazy loud, but since you can see this huge peak over here, you can see this actually has a lot of sub frequency, which you might not hear on your speakers, but it's going to be very, very oomphy in the club. So this is also why checking this and also checking this visual can help you tell if if there's a lot of sub in there, and if it might be, maybe you don't even need it to be that long because there's a lot of bass coming in after. So let's look at some others. So here you see it's more of a punchy kick. You also have some stuff around 200 hertz, and then this is kind of flat and you don't have this big tail, right? So this could work if you, for example, have a very tonal bass line and you want the tone of the bass to come through mainly and not the kick. You can go for something punchy like this. But with this kick, for example, you can be sure that it's going to be kind of a tonal bass. Which gets me to another part for kick drums. When I was checking out and giving feedback to some tracks of family and friends, I would see them pitch up and down the kick drum to kind of get the sound that they like, and then pitch it down by quite a bit, and all of a sudden be very, very deep from a bass perspective. Like in some cases, I even saw some guys who pitched it down like this. And to work in a club, you can kind of focus on being 40 hertz and up, because under there it doesn't work that well anymore. But you will always see tracks that have fundamentals and low bass notes between 30 and 40 hertz. Rarely below 30 hertz, but I would leave this up to the pros to handle. I mean, you can totally do it, but just as a rule of thumb, around 40 hertz and up usually works best. Okay, so much to kicks and their frequency content. Same goes for like this kick, for example. You can see, well, let me actually play this. You can see that this has a relatively high fundamental note, around 60 hertz, which can tell you, well, this kick sounds very cool, but it might need a different sub-bass sound in your track that is below 60 hertz, because if it's only 60 hertz and up, might not be low and strong enough in the club. And for this track, I actually know that there is a sub-bass which is playing a note below 60 hertz. So that's how they work together. This was already a lot of talking and quite fast, but I think this is a good way to get started. I cannot go over every single example in different styles of tracks, but this approach can definitely help to understand what does the low end look like, how loud is it, what is it doing dynamically, and this kind of stuff. So yeah, I hope this helped to get you in the direction of analyzing tracks in a way that you can understand how the low end is working, and then how you can also use the same approach to check the low end of your own tracks. If you might need a bit of level, might need to kick a bit shorter, stuff like this. And hope to see you around soon. Peace.